So, it's time to start with our last panel. It's been a beautiful, wonderful time with you, Your Holiness. Thank you so much. We've learned so much. And the topic now is, should morals come before markets? And it's a good transition from our previous discussion. And because we heard in some of our previous discussion the extent to which capitalism takes some hits in the media and in politics. And the question is, does it deserve it? Are markets ethical? Do they lead us more than any other system to do the right thing? And we have a great panel and a great group. And we all know each other now, so no need for introductions. But Gersharon, I wanted you to begin and tell us, are markets moral or immoral?
Well, I think markets are neither moral nor immoral. They are an institution. There are moral people and immoral people in this institution. But what makes markets significant is that the institutions of the market give us signals to behave morally. Let me illustrate with a few real-life examples. Near my house in Delhi, where I live, there is a woman who sells fruit. And one day, I complained to her that the fruit, the mangoes she was selling, were very expensive. She said, no, but they're very good. So you buy them. So I bought them. I took them home, and the mangoes turned out to be bad. So I got very upset. I told my neighbor told his neighbor, and very quickly the word spread that this was a woman who was misclaiming, and we all shifted to her competitor, to another person who was selling fruit. Now, the purpose of this story is that the market itself, the competition in the market itself, gave us choice. We were able to punish bad behavior. A person who misclaims the product that he makes or sells, the person who's dishonest, what results is that your trust gets broken, and therefore the market itself is reinforcing moral behavior. That's my first example. The second example is in Procter & Gamble, where I worked for many years. We had a purchase manager. He had a tendency to squeeze his supplier. He would try to beat down the price. Well, one time he did it too hard. And so the supplier delivered a component which went into our product, which was defective, because he had beaten him down on price. We suffered as a result. So there again, the fact is, if you're not fair to your suppliers, you lose. And so the market is reinforcing good behavior. The third example is a small company which has amazing talent to hire the best products of our universities, our IITs, our IIMs. Now, why does this small company do better than even Tata's in hiring the best people? Because it has created a reputation for treating its people so well, for motivating the employees, that everybody wants to join that company. So that's the third example of how markets send the right signals to behave morally. And the final example is somebody came to me, the General Electric company of US, GE, came to me and asked me, they were looking for a partner. Who should they partner with? And I thought immediately, my mind said, Tatas. Why Tatas? Because Tatas have built a reputation for honesty, for trust, for philanthropy. So therefore, reputation in markets, that builds your brand, your reputation. So I think all these four examples show you that the markets are based on trust, and therefore when I get into a taxi, the taxi driver doesn't immediately check how much money I have in my pocket, whether I'll be able to pay. He goes by trust. So when I give you a check, if I have money, you don't call your bank to see whether I have enough money. You take it on trust. Now, so trust is a word that is very central to the market. And it's the same word which is in the classical Indian tradition is dharma. Dharma, not in the Buddhist sense alone, but dharma as doing the right thing. And when people act with dharma, there is harmony. Dharma means restraint. And so the fact is that markets themselves may not be moral or immoral. Individuals can be, but markets send right signals for good behavior. And the fact is that they punish bad behavior. So self-regulation is a very central part of the market economy. But because there are crooks in society, you need regulation also to catch the crooks.
So Arthur, I want to bring you in here. You are the great exponent of free enterprise in the world. In the United States, you're the leading proponent of all the things that we believe in at the American Enterprise Institute. What is the key? What have you found has been most successful at communicating that message of the benefits of free markets? And how does that key relate to morals and morality?
Gucharan has the concept exactly right. I'm going to make sure that this is on. Okay. I think Gucharan has it exactly right to begin with. Markets are like a machine. Markets are like a car. I can use my car for great evil, or I can use my car to take me to work for great good. The choice doesn't depend on the markets or the car. The choice depends on me. The problem that we have in society is not that we have too much markets, it's that we have too little morals. So here's how we think about it. There's a formula that the world brings to us when we don't have morals, that when we only have markets. The formula that the world brings to us is to use people and love things. That's exactly wrong. It's exactly backwards. If we motivate market activity in moral behavior, then we have the opposite formula, which is to use things and love people. But that requires a fundamental understanding that morals must always come before markets. If we believe that the free enterprise system is the best system for lifting people up, then we must motivate all of our action and all of our rhetoric in basic human morality that doesn't depend on economics at all. So therefore, I'd like to propose that there are fundamental values to good capitalism. There are fundamental values that have to underlie our ability to use the machine in a responsible way. And this is how I think we should talk about the morality that goes behind good free enterprise, meaningful capitalism, and markets that can behave in a moral way. Here are the three principles. They're service, non-attachment, and optimism. Here's what I mean. Service is related to compassion. If we, and we've talked about this about 4 times over the past 2 days, we have to base our economic activity remembering that the reason that we have abundance is so that we can serve other people. It's not so that we can serve ourselves. We have to escape the prison that we have of serving ourselves, and in thereby doing, we can become rich, but to be rich means that we're rich in the service to other people. This is the first fundamental value. Now, the free enterprise system has made this possible, not just in serving other people through charity, but creating creative opportunity by treating people as individuals among the 7 billion that are on the planet. And we know, and again, we talked about this in the last session, that free enterprise has lifted 2 billion people out of poverty. The world 300 years ago was almost completely poor. And now there are billions of people who are not poor. Even in countries that need more freedom, free enterprise has been helpful. So even in a country like China, which is not free and subjugates its people and is repressive, still there's enough free enterprise that 680 million Chinese have been pulled out of starvation, and 500 million are no longer poor. It's an incredible achievement. But this requires the spirit of sharing opportunity if we want to get the next 2 billion and 3 billion and 5.3 billion to be lifted out of poverty. Now, there are a lot of ways to do that, and we've talked about them, but one thing I want to emphasize, the worst sin that we can commit in today's world is ordinarily committed by politicians who are seeking power. And that is the opposite of a world of opportunity, which is the world of envy. And it's so dangerous. To accumulate power, politicians turn people against each other so they can't work together. They're envious of the possessions that other people have. Why is that a sin? Because it dehumanizes the poor. It tells the poor that they will have better lives simply if they can grab something away from others who are rich. And that's a real danger that we have to avoid all the time. That's not an abundance mindset, which Eliza brought up just a moment ago. So service is the most important, and opportunity is the basis of service in the free enterprise system. Second is non-attachment, which is one of the fundamental principles of this conference. It sounds to Americans like a very Eastern concept, but it really isn't an Eastern concept. It's a human concept of not being attached to things that are inadequate. There's a Sanskrit word, and Gucharan, you taught me this. And the Sanskrit word is upadana, which basically means the sticky craving for inadequate things, which is evocative of things sticking to you that are not what you want, but which you try to accumulate. The spirit of non-attachment is one in which we realize that materialism is a tyranny for everyone, and the will to power is dangerous for everyone. Yesterday, I was at the Tibetan library, and I was speaking to a senior monk who was the translator for His Holiness for 16 years. What's his name? Mm-hmm. And he said something very profound. He talked about Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong started with a good idea of actually trying to lift people up who were poor. But then he became crazy for power. And his craziness for power was a form of attachment that all of us, especially in this room, the 1% in society, there's a danger for us to have this. Now, in the case of Mao Zedong, 75 million people died. Most of us don't have the power to kill 75 million people. But all of us can do great harm through our attachment to the inadequate things. Remember that the highest ideal is to use things, which is good, but to love people only. Because only people and God are worthy of love, never things, the basis of non-attachment. How do we remember non-attachment? The answer to this is to remember that we are not the owners of anything. We are the stewards of things in society. Those of us that are blessed with great material resources don't own those things. We're simply the stewards of these things to bring the blessings to more people. Now, private property is incredibly important. Hernando de Soto has written that private property is the basis of a society that's no longer poor, but private property simply means that we can protect things to share them with others more effectively. So stewardship is key. And there's one other key to non-attachment that His Holiness has talked about in his writings. One of the ways to be non-attached is to remember the virtue of gratitude. We should be grateful for the fact that we are blessed with abundance, and that gratitude separates us from the attachment, from the fear, from the idea of scarcity that we have. The last concept is one that Robert has brought up throughout this conference, which is optimism. Optimism is all about a belief in people, in each person on the planet, each of the 7 billion people. We have a problem in the West, in Europe especially, but in the United States too, where governments and people of privilege see the poor not as assets, but as liabilities, as a problem. The poor are a problem, and you have to solve the problem. And the way that you do that is by finding ways to keep them out of sight with just enough and dependent so they don't become a bigger problem. That's the wrong mindset because it's pessimistic. Optimism about people is to see each person as a little bit of divinity with a lot of potential, that the building blocks for a great society is with poor people because they actually haven't built what they need to build yet. That kind of optimism is key. This is one of the fundamental ideas in America, is this optimism about every single person. My wife is an immigrant to the United States. My wife grew up poor. and in another country, in Spain. And when she came to the United States, she didn't have education, but she got a job, a low-paying job. She couldn't believe that somebody wanted to give her a job. She didn't speak English, and she didn't have an education. And she said, "This is the greatest country in the world for people who want to work." That's a country that's built on optimism. And if we remember this, then free markets can reflect our morality and help us to save our world. But only if we remember these three ideas of compassion through service, non-attachment, and optimism about people.
Libby Liu, president of Radio Free Asia. When we were speaking, we learned yesterday that you are the key ingredient to this relationship between AEI and Arthur and His Holiness. What is it about what the two messages are talking to each other about that you find so compelling, and how does it apply to what is the present and potential future in China?
Okay, I don't want to take credit for this, but I will tell you what inspired me to this, and that is Arthur's commitment to the principle of moral capitalism. I'm very concerned about the stigma attached to the word capitalism, and it is because of the managed capitalism that is being masqueraded as capitalism or transitional democracy in these countries. And I felt there's a very strong alignment between what His Holiness believes and what Arthur is talking about. Now in China, which I think is incredibly important because not only of the huge population and the incredible economic power, but their sphere of influence through decades of brilliant investment in the third world everywhere is huge. Now, if you look at China, there is a total lack of moral center. And this is a result of the Communist Party. You have the one-child policy, which means nobody has ever had to share with a sibling. They've only ever had to think of themselves, and the two parents are only thinking of one child. Then you have no religion. The Chinese have deprived humans of a spiritual life, which is not natural. Humans need a spiritual life. And because of this, there's no community, as we discussed yesterday. And that leads to a society where there are ended up the leaders, the elite. They have managed capitalism. They've been brought up through the Cultural Revolution, where they were rewarded for very bad behavior, and that led to corruption. And we're in a situation now in China where even if somebody wants to do something good, okay, say with the melamine in the baby formula problem, they can't because there's corruption on every level, and it's endemic since forever. But I believe in the optimism because I believe that every human's need for a spiritual life will draw them back to their moral center. And you see it in every one of our countries that denies the free speech, the free press, free association, and free religion. The people in power are trying to deny that human dignity, but man will prevail because they are willing to risk their lives, to become dignity, to have dignity, and to keep that moral center that they're born with. So I completely believe in the concept of moral capitalism, and I very much want to destroy the stigma attached to capitalism.
Tali, yesterday you talked about Adam Smith, and you said something about his theory. And we've heard from some dialogues about great theories and great ideas and great management. But in practicality, they don't always work. What is it about capitalism that is more practical?
This is work. No? Yes, it's working. No? Can you hear me?
Almost. It takes a second.
There you go.
No?
Yeah.
I'll talk loud. Which I usually don't. Let me Let me talk more generally to get
you an answer to that question. There's no argument between socialists and capitalists about objectives. I think it's to maximize human flourishing in a very moral way. Talk is cheap. There is the American project is 250 plus years old. Through that whole time, there's been a tension and a debate between the proponents of equality and redistribution and the proponents of maximizing opportunity. That is hardwired into the founding documents. There were utopian communities in the United States 200 years ago that uniformly failed. That's a socialist, that's a flavor of socialism. There have been moments when there were real capitalist abuses, capitalist immorality. We've got that now. We have something called crony capitalism. I think we all know what that is. That's unfair. I think you appended the word to capitalism, and you talked about liberal capitalism. That's really the American system, which is the only one I know reasonably well. Liberal is not liberal in the sense of Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. It's liberal in the sense of freedom, a belief in natural law, a belief in individual rights and fairness. And that is the flavor of capitalism that the founders understood as right, and that has prevailed overall in the United States. It's important to distinguish between perfection and what you can really achieve, no matter what the system is. But you really need a system. Without a system, you can't impact enough people. You know, you can have little Inuit bartering systems and potlatch and some village elder that distributes stuff, but if you want to really impact people on a large scale, you need an economic system. And to steal a phrase from the global climate lobby, and to be just slightly hyperbolic, I think the science is settled on liberal capitalism. I think it works. It's the least worst alternative system at best, to steal from Churchill. And you have to have a system you want a system that has maximum positive impact and either encourages or at least rewards morality, which is what you were talking about. I think that's the system. So I just think the record is clear. You were very vocal, Your Holiness, in talking about the failures of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc and China. That's what happens. And I think it's because at the end of the day, Adam Smith's invisible hand is replaced by the decisions and the objectives and the greediness of a small group of people. And guess what? Bad things happen.
Gershwin, you want to pipe
Well,
in?
I wanted to comment on quickly on something Arthur said, and I didn't get your name.
Libby Lou.
Yes, you said Libby. You know, when we talk too much about compassionate capitalism or moral capitalism, we are actually undervaluing the ability of capitalism to deliver certain morality from within it. And those were the examples I was giving, that how markets reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. So while markets are neutral, but an institution which can do that doesn't require, well, it's always helpful to have other good values that Arthur and Libby were talking about. They're all good to be good human beings.
But you're saying that
But
it's innately moral.
That there is an innate morality in markets. Now, I was very sympathetic, Your Holiness, when you said that you had a preference for socialism. But I think your preference for socialism is a preference that all human beings have for equality. We all would like a more equal world. So if socialism means that we would all like an aspiration for equality, we are all socialists in the world. But the central meaning of socialism that Marx was talking about was the state ownership of the means of production. Now, when the state owns the means of production, you get the exact opposite of the moral behavior that we were talking about in capitalism. And so we have to be very careful when we use words like socialism and capitalism. If we mean, if state ownership of the in capitalism we say it's self-interest, self-interest. But people say it's greed. Now, that is not true. The fact is that it is self-interest that is promoting. What Adam Smith talked about was not greed, it was self-interest. Now, self-interest is if it's raining outside, I carry an umbrella. There's nothing immoral about that. It's nothing greedy about carrying an umbrella. So in the same way, we undervalue some of the reasons that drive us to behave in a certain way.
Mr. DeSoto, you wrote a book, Why Capitalism Thrives in the West but Fails Everywhere Else. Are all people in all places up to or prepared for the opportunity offered by free markets and capitalism?
Yes, based on the latest evidence I've seen, as I've been driven up from the airport to here, all I saw were one individual shop after another.
Yes.
And everybody was trying to sell something, and everybody was producing something. As a matter of fact, I thought of a story. Let me tell you something that I have seen that was my latest, greatest evidence. I've been telling Arthur about this when I was very much enthused by the initiative of American capitalism coming all the way up here to see His Holiness, surely the most respected person in the world, according to all accounts and according to all measurements, and trying to make the connection with morality. And I think that just too few capitalists have done that. There's been too much about efficiency. It doesn't mean what they feel inside, but I mean, this is a public reaching out. Well, one of the latest things we've done that has appeared here and there, but most in the Middle East, where we got 178 front page coverage, is our covering of the Arab Spring, which relates to what your question precisely, and which is something I'd like to turn into this conference. We were very much interested when the Arab Spring began by a man called Mohammed Bouazizi in the fair city of Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia, self-immolating. He self-immolated, and he was a merchant. And we wanted to find out why. He took 2 months to die, but in the process, he brought down in 2 months 4 governments in the Middle East, and the process continues. Well, when we went to interview him, of course, he wasn't there to be interviewed. It was his family. We also did newspaper research and found out that at the time that he self-immolated, 63 other people self-immolated simultaneously, all throughout the Arab world. This is now in a film that's in PBS, comes out 3 times a week in the United States. It's all over the Arab world. It's an alternative view of what happened. Of these 64 people that self-immolated, 37 survived. They were extinguished in the process. And we have the films of all 64 of them self-immolating. This is the first time that something in a long time, since Lawrence of Arabia, that the Arabs have actually gotten from the bottom up and started shaking the place up. So it was interesting to find out what it is that motivated them. Now, of the 37, half volunteered to be interviewed. It's taken 3 years. And here's the thing that's important by watching them as they self-immolate. Nobody self-immolates burning, without having a statement to make. And everybody's got their mobile phones, and everybody's recording and filming. Mm-hmm. First of all, there wasn't one religious statement. In other words, it wasn't about Allah is great. There wasn't one political statement. Everybody talked about expropriation. They had all been expropriated. And they weren't talking about being expropriated by a superior capitalist, but about government, was the first thing. The next thing that was interesting is that when we started getting familiar with them, and they viewed us as Christians, said, there's something about suicide which sounds very unethical. What have you got to say about that? And the reply that we got is, forget about that. That is a minor aspect of Islam. The most important thing about Islam is the respect for things that other people own, respect for other individuals, respect for your harbor. But you wouldn't understand that, said the people I was being interviewed, because you're a Christian. And your prophet chased the people out of the market, while our prophet was a merchant. So here's my question. Here you are, Arthur, reaching out to the most respected figure in the world, trying to see how capitalism recuperates its old, basically moral tradition, which is, how about stopping kings only accumulating all wealth and giving us all the chance to also get prosperous? Would it be interesting, Your Holiness, that a religious order not only live among the poor, but, you know, walking up Dharamsala, all these people are individuals, that holy people also try to give us a message the other way around. What is it that we are missing, those of us who believe in capitalism, when we do our trading that isn't getting across? In other words, would it be interesting to have holy people live among the merchants to see what else we should be doing?
If I may,
Yes.
because Adam Smith and the invisible hand and Gurcharan example of the vegetable seller being talked about, and how the market actually readjusts itself and the moral values are always comes back. But I think here perhaps if I bring Max Weber, idea is always good and neutral, but once you institutionalize it, once you have a system, the system itself have vested interest to survive. And then when you have to bring individuals in it, individual have its own vested interest to exploit the system. They will exploit idea to sustain the institution for his or own survival. So if the market economy functions in the Adam Smith invisible hand, if you let invisible hand function itself, then I think market economy should survive, it should thrive, and should distribute the wealth. But problem is there is other hand that comes and manipulate the market. The system is rigged. Why the most expensive zip code in the US, of the 10, 5 most expensive zip code in the US, is not Silicon Valley, it's not Los Angeles, not Manhattan, but it's DC and the neighboring area. Why? The
We are hearing from the
lobbyists-
political,
the lobbyists
one politician to
paid
another.
the highest salary to rig the system for the capitalist.
Yeah.
Democracy is rigged. That's why it costs billions of dollars to run a presidential campaign now, because it's rigged. Even the spiritualism is rigged now. If you have to have a darshan of a spiritual leader, you have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Only the rich can pay. So the system is rigged. Capitalism is rigged. Democracy is rigged. Spiritualism is rigged. Because we all talk about having a system which self-regulates. It does not. Hence, and coming back to His Holiness, why we all drive up the dirt road of Dharamsala, which is recently cemented, though, to meet with His Holiness, is he's different. To have access to him, you don't have to pay anything. He gives speeches all around the world. There's no speaking fees, actually. People get surprised. So you come to him to seek his idea as to how we can unrig the system and put a human face, a compassionate face to capitalism, compassionate face to democracy, compassionate face to spiritualism itself. So I think here, and I'm coming back to His Holiness' message, it all depends on individual. You start with the individual, and you start with your own heart, and the moral values are compassion within. Otherwise, as Max Weber says, from idea to institution to individual, vested interests will keep exploiting itself. And the people feel frustrated, and hence what you have in Europe, they are voting for the leftists, far leftists, even in Canada, everywhere. So people are not complaining about the idea. Even the idea of religion is good. But people are complaining the rigged system. That's what people are frustrated.
What about it, Arthur?
Well, we've talked a little bit about Adam Smith and the invisible hand. This comes, of course, from The Wealth of Nations, written in 1776, which is a very important year for my country. But it was an important year for world philosophy because the Scottish Enlightenment had produced Adam Smith, who wrote this book about how markets work and should indeed reinforce virtue. But that wasn't his most important book. His most important book was written 17 years earlier in 1759. It was The Theory of Moral Sentiments. Adam Smith considered that to be a more important book, and after The Wealth of Nations, he came back to it and worked on it for the rest of his life. The central insight from the theory of moral sentiments is that we cannot even deserve a free system or a free market unless we have a heart that's oriented correctly, that unless we're oriented toward fair play and service to others. This is exactly what His Holiness has talked about for decades, fair play and service to others. Then, and only then the free market can be self-reinforcing for virtue. So then Gucharan can talk to his neighbors and reinforce a market mechanism that penalizes the vegetable seller who's not telling the truth. That's when it works. But if we don't have the moral sentiments in our heart, if we don't believe in fair play, if the cleverest, most powerful people can take advantage of the system, then the system collapses. And when the system collapses, then we turn to the government. And the government imposes a rules-based approach. And a rules-based approach is socialism. And socialism takes the creativity and the initiative away from the poor, and it turns us into automatons. It doesn't see us as individuals. It sees us as one mass. It doesn't see 7 billion people as 7 billion individuals with dignity, but 7 billion people as one group that has to be administered by the most powerful people in the state. If we want to avoid socialism, if we want capitalism to reward our creativity and not to take away our humanity, we have to base it in this theory of moral sentiment such that, exactly as Gucharan states, that the system can, at that point, reinforce itself.
So, Your Holiness, one of the greatest Americans I know is here with us. Harlan Crow runs a beautiful, great business in Texas, builds buildings and residential developments all over the United States. He's also a great world traveler, knows almost all the corners of the world. And I wanted to ask you, Harlan, what is it that you want to bring to the places you visit from America? What lesson, what aspect of our market economy or our freedom that you want to convey to the places you visit?
Thanks, Robert. I think that's way too much of a thing for me to take on. I would like to suggest that in the room we have a lot of people who are agreeing with each other quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess that I'd like to associate myself with almost everything Hernando said. It was brilliant. And my friend Tully the same. But I'd like to say that I don't think this free enterprise, this capitalism matter is a settled matter at all. One could easily look at the American political presidential election and divine that the notion that free enterprise has triumphed and everything else is in the dustbin. That's really not right. So I think that it's a worthwhile discussion of trying to flesh that matter out and really put some more sound science behind the triumph of free enterprise, with which I would associate myself.
Well, Harlan, I want to bring Danny in here for a minute, because if Harlan's right, then and the system is rigged, then what is it about American values or free market economy or democracy that we should feel proud enough about to try to export?
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for saving the easy questions for me and Harlan. Look, America, we talk about this all the time at AEI. America is the most powerful country in the world. We are the most successful economy in the world. When we seek to selfishly keep those privileges to ourselves, then we are truly failing. We lose our moral authority. We hurt ourselves. This is, like as Gucharan said, one of the lessons of the market is, if you don't care about others, if you treat them badly, if you are, to use the analogies I so often use, if we are indifferent to the fate of others, because they're just killing each other and it doesn't matter, because the Chinese are more important to us than the people of Tibet. If we're indifferent to others, that hurts us. And I think that the challenge that we face is exactly as so many of you have rightly described. It is that the United States as a government is increasingly reluctant to suggest that it has any moral authority to advocate for change overseas. Who are we to tell you this? And this is the work that Libby does. So I'll give you a perfect example from the Arab Spring. Okay, what do these people who immolate themselves in the Arab Spring feel? What do all those people who went into Tahrir Square and into the streets of Tunisia and of Libya, what are they there about? Part of it is about tyranny. It's about human freedom. It's about political freedom. But part of it is also a genuine disgust with the crony capitalism that is rife throughout the Middle East. And this is the problem. I just put it in very mundane terms, okay? If you go to the United Arab Emirates, our ally on many issues, the royal family controls almost all the capital from the oil market, and their friends control the Mercedes dealership, the Coca-Cola dealership, the cement factory dealerships, the flour dealerships, everything that matters to the economy and that could help people rise up is in the hands of the pets of the government, okay? You could talk about that in China, exactly the same thing. This is the managed capitalism that has given capitalism a bad name. And when you try to use our moral authority to suggest that that's wrong, you get crushed, right? You, Radio Free Asia, get told not to do that. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty get told not to do that. Our ambassadors get told not to stand up to people who do that because we are not supposed to be in that business. And I think that that's where we fail.
But isn't But isn't part of the reason that happens is because when the easy remarks about the messiness of American democracy and the presidential election and how get unrefuted. We don't acknowledge that a democracy, a free market world, it has a morality, but it's not placid. It's not simple. It's not without its complexity. And I think it's that complexity that leads us to be defensive, when in fact we should say that while it's not perfect, it may be the best of all the alternatives.
Robert, I want to come back to my disagreement with my good friend Harlan. I actually think what's going on in the country is there's an expression, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. So I would say eternal vigilance is the price of capitalism. And there's a lot of bad stuff going on, and it needs to be addressed and fixed. I don't think it vitiates the validity or the compelling case for capitalism. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, right. Of course, Ron, and then I'm going to turn to this holiness.
The thing is, look at it from the Indian perspective for a minute, that the economic rise, political rise of India has been the most important event of my life. That here's a country which has risen on the principles of political and economic liberty. And the fact of the matter is that at a time when the Western world is filled with angst about the whole system of liberty. And really, even in India today, the problem is that with so much benefit, I mean, our middle class was 2% in 1950, 8% in 1980, 33% today, and in 10 years it will be 50%. Now, the question is, people still believe that the reforms, that capitalism makes the rich richer, the poor poorer, and if any candidate stands for election, for parliament, he will never give the message of the market. He will always lose to the candidate who promises free food, free electricity, and so it's a constant, the invisible hand is invisible. The voter cannot see that invisible hand. Unfortunately, the voter can see that this candidate will give me half-price electricity from the day he's elected. I have a tangible benefit. But you tell the person, the voter, that look, we have to have investment, we have to create a good climate for investment, we have to have law and order, we have to balance the budget, all the things that makes ultimately the markets work. That message is a very difficult message to give. Mm-hmm. That is the problem. The problem you face in the United States, and the problem that we face in India. And I met Modi 6 months ago, and he's, this is our Prime Minister, Modi, and he says, he had gathered a few people, and what would you like me to do, he kind of said. And I said, you've got to sell the market. He has a radio program every Sunday called Man Ki Baat. It's like a fireside chat. And I told him, how you've got to explain people that it doesn't make the rich richer and the poor poorer. Yes, there is inequality in the system, but there's also inequality in life as such. But the fact is that competition improves the quality of products, it lowers costs, lowers prices, and ultimately everybody gains. And capitalism is not crony capitalism, which is what the other side is constantly telling us, that capitalism in fact is crony capitalism. Now, that's a message which is a very hard message. That's why we're all kind of struggling here.
Angst. Yeah.
I feel.
Tully?
What comes to mind, we have a problem very similar to yours, and when I tell your colleagues we have it, they're surprised. We have a serious crisis in our public education system. We're not educating our kids by and large. There is a parallel system. There's a series of parallel systems that have arisen of charter schools, private schools for ordinary people. Some are good, some are bad, but they're overall addressing the problem. That's a perfect example of competition working. And believe me, the parents, you talk about this eloquently, the parents who are offered a chance, and it's usually by lottery in some of these schools, the inner city parents, to send their kids to these schools would kill to get their kids into these schools. They know, they understand the truth of what you're talking about.
Your Holiness, we've had a wonderful time, and I wondered if you would speculate on what you would say to the Prime Minister of India about competition and how it relates to the future of India.
Oh, very difficult. Of course, I publicly, as well as to the Prime Minister, also I mentioned, you see, the India, 1,000-year-old certain sort of right concept of ahimsa, and with that rich harmony, these over 1,000 years kept. And also the ancient Indian sort of knowledge about mind. I usually describe ancient Indian sort of psychology, compare the modern psychology, ancient Indian sort of knowledge about mind is highly developed, much advanced. Compare that, modern sort of psychology is something like kindergarten level. So these things, real richness of India. So while you sort of getting modern education, technology, these things, these ancient Indian richness, you should not neglect. Combine ancient your real knowledge. Now today, very relevant. Over 30 years, you see, my sort of meeting with scientists, mainly from the West, from America, as I mentioned yesterday. In this very room, you see, a few occasions, you see, we discuss. So they really showing eagerness to learn from ancient Indian knowledge about human emotion, human mind, and with fuller knowledge about the whole system of emotion, then much easier to tackle. So modern Indian, I think more or less it's not pay much attention about these things. So that I told the Prime Minister also. So that I feel. Now I want to sort of ask a sort of question or sort of as a question or as the curiosity. Sweden, you see, in the past, truly socialist country. Not much noise. And nowadays, so therefore, as a socialist country, gap rich and poor much less. And Austria also, you see, I was told not much sort of millionaire, more or less sort of middle class people. Because of that big portion of middle class people. So, why it happened? Why?
The
I'm a democratic country,
Yeah.
free country.
Yeah.
Oh,
Every country has a different culture with different people and different populations. And the Scandinavian countries with relatively small populations have a lot of social consensus. Most people believe that the most socialist country that's pretty happy is Denmark. People talk about Denmark a lot. And when you go to Denmark and you ask people, there's a lot of social consensus about the equality that they want and a small population where a government can function pretty well. It's hard to imagine a government functioning well in a chaotic country like the United States or the most chaotic country in the world, which is India. So it's hard. Just be a billion people with 1,000 languages who are limited ability and willingness to cooperate with each other, how a Danish system could possibly work. But about culture, and I say this with affection because I love this country, and it's a great country that's on the rise. One comment about the culture of Denmark, which is interesting. In 1903, my great-grandparents left Denmark. Why did they leave Denmark? Because they felt constrained by that social consensus. They had a first-grade education. They were basically illiterate. They had the wrong religion. They didn't have the religion of the consensus. And they had a will to start a farm, and they couldn't do it in Denmark because they didn't have property. The people who came to America, including my great-grandparents, had aspiration. They didn't have greed. They had aspiration. This is the essence of what Gurcharan was saying, quite correctly. That's the basis of good capitalism is aspiration for greater things. And all of the people that left Denmark and went to America had a different culture, and they wanted something that was more aspirational. And the people who stayed in Denmark created the social consensus of relative equality. The good thing about a modern society is that people can be in places where they can choose different systems. Even Denmark, however, is a market-based system with a strong government and not the kind of socialism that has turned into a cancer in China, where all of the creativity is pulled out of the population.
Libby,
so
you,
this economy, let's say, no matter what kind of system, but much depend on political system.
Yes.
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 So I think former Soviet Union, economy stagnation because of centralized the political system, totalitarian system, and China as well.
Yes.
Exactly.
So when we talk about the economy, these things, we also should include all
The
different
system.
or say the aspects. That really makes differences. So freedom is something very important in any way.
Yes.
What I
And
wanted
then,
to
then you mentioned the religious leader, how much the Lama speaking. But right.
Spiritual leaders. His question was, how can a spiritual leader talk to followers about better economic ideas?
Yes.
I think you say not only just the individual religious leader, but religion itself. I think over 3,000 years supposed to bring happy humanity, but faith. I really think that. Certainly, you see, we can make some contribution, but nobody can solve this problem if we rely on religious sort of teaching.
Alone.
Difficult.
Your Holiness, the question was, the question is the following what Arthur's been saying. The whole system of capitalism or free enterprise or whatever one wants to call it is something that nobody in particular designed. That's why we talk about capitalism, free enterprise. Nobody's happy with the word, but we don't talk about Smithism like there's Marxism, because Marxism was a design. We don't know where it's going. Nobody knows where it's going. All we know is that it's so far unbeatable in terms of producing wealth and has had many problems in terms of how you reach consensuses. What I personally, not being a North American, I'm from South America, from Peru, what I admire about the United States in a way, some of you guys are not going to like this, is that the way their political system is organized is they've got a party that tries to protect people from big business, and another one that tries to protect them from big government, and I think that that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But we don't know where we're going. My question to you, in a way, was, you think about morality. I mean, the tradition of ethics is yours. So I was telling myself as I, went through India and went to Dharamsala and saw all these shops, wouldn't it be interesting, since we don't know the answer? I mean, this is why AEI and Arthur Brooks, as far as I can see, are reaching out to you. Would it be interesting to do not scholarly work, but some empathy, spiritual work in terms of seeing what are the difficulties that a merchant faces morally, because all of these guys are merchants facing moral problems. What would you have to say by getting immersed in that side? Getting immersed, getting people who are of the faith looking at the inside story of a merchant trying to be moral and make money at the same time. That's all I was saying.
Libby, and then you. We're going to have Libby
We're
and
gonna
then
rock,
you.
and we're going to wrap.
And then we're going to wrap. Is that all right?
It's up to you,
Okay.
boss.
Yeah. Oh, wait, we can't.
Okay. I just wanted to bring it back to the subject, which is morality and markets. And I tell you, I agree. Competition is great. And all these examples of governments that work and et cetera with the opportunities. Morality matters because without morality, there's no rule of law. If there's no rule of law, nobody has a chance. There's no competition. So that's why morality and markets are so key, and that's why we're having this conversation, in my opinion.
Yes. Of course, Ron.
Another thing, I think I emphasize not on religious faith, but basic human, goodness. Our life start with love, with compassion. And this body survived and properly sort of developed with others' affection, particularly mother's affection. So, first child is surrounded with the atmosphere of affection. Then physical development, as well as mental development, emotional development, much healthier. So this is nothing to do with religion. And all religions' essence is like this. I am Buddhist. So now here you see the differences. We have no concept of creator. Buddha say, or Jainism also you say, the self is creator, so self-creation. So there's differences. And anyway, you see, all major religious tradition, actually, within human being, not other animals, not other sentient being. So all major religious tradition, essence of their practice is and message is love, because you see, compassion, love is the basis of our survival. So now here, you know, I think now, I believe, you see, the scientists, genuine scientists, their mind very open. Sometimes you see, my word may not be because of the very unbiased way. I'm Buddhist, but sometimes because of inclined about Buddhist concept. So there are those scientists, non-believer, they are open-minded, unbiased. They believe reasons, experiment. Although Buddha also mentioned that. Buddha told us, my follower should not accept my teaching out of faith, out of devotion, but rather thorough investigation and experiment. So that's quite, so therefore I usually used to tell him, when my sort of, friend, sometimes I give Buddha statue, then I told them, you consider this person one way great philosopher, great thinker, and one way ancient great Indian scientist. Believe reason, experiment, not just faith. So in any way, such image. So why all religion, different places, different time, all emphasis importance of love, compassion, because humanity, you see, our life very much depends on that. And then we are social animal. Friendship is key thing. Friendship entirely depends on trust. Trust depends on love. If you show genuine sense of concern, genuine respect, then trust comes. I think, see, we can learn animals. I think other day also, yesterday also I mentioned, you see dogs, you see cats, you see my small cat, you see, prefer person who really take care of her, not thinking about Dalai Lama or some sort of rich people. No, never consider these things important. They really appreciate genuine affection. So ultimately we are a social animal. Money, education, or knowledge, these things is an important part of human life. Ultimate importance is human love. So that's because now scientists also say basic human nature is more compassionate. I think I didn't mention yesterday. Sometime in our meeting with scientists, some really top, sort of say, well-known scientists, like Richard Davidson. You see, one occasion, you see, he mentioned they carry some kind of experiment to a very, very young child, infant, only few months, 2 months, 3 months old, language not yet developed. Then to that child show cartoon, one cartoon, two children play together, some smile. Then showing you see, that cartoon to the very, very infants of the child, feel happy. Then another cartoon, two children, a little bit of negative attitude each other. Then the child unhappy. So, and then most important, constant anger, stress, too much stress, fear, very bad for our health. Calm mind, very good for our health. So this, this aspect, I think I can tell you. My niece, my compassion, not much effect. But basic sort of physical condition, I think my practice of compassion really makes differences. So therefore, you see, now according to the scientists, now this is whether called moral or other word. You see, the warm-heartedness is the key factor for humanity, for our sort of survival, for our happiness. So that is the central sort of mission. All our activities, economy, politics, or everything, you see, based on that kind of attitude, that kind of motivation, then everything becomes good. That's my belief. And then, you see, I won't say practice compassion, then doing nothing. Then we will starve. So we have to work, making money.
Yeah, yeah.
So American economy is very, very important for us.
And Arthur, close us out.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you very much.
we've arrived at the end. Thank you, Robert, for this. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to His Holiness. What a wonderful 2 days that we've had, and what a privilege to be together. If there are just a couple of words to sum up what we've done here, I'm gonna, with real humility, I'm gonna try to sum this up. His Holiness reminds us that we should see ourselves as each one of us as one of 7 billion. Yet all of us are one morally because we're the same. We are living in a time of unprecedented prosperity for which we're grateful, yet too many people have been left behind. And these are challenges of our day. So what do we need? We've been talking about what we need, which is a system that does 3 things. It's capable of lifting each one of us up, of treating each one of us as an individual, and that lets all of us create abundance so that we can serve others. That system is free enterprise, but reinforced by human morality. So now we all go home. His Holiness stays here. What do we do next? I'm going to suggest that we think about each of us doing 4 things now that we've had this experience. Number 1, I'd ask each of us to be grateful for the abundance in our world, not to be embarrassed by the abundance and not to reject the abundance, but to be thankful for the abundance in this world and for the system that's made it possible. Second, however, as His Holiness reminds us, we should reject materialism and greed and pursue moral awareness. Third, as leaders, and each person in this room is a leader, we should dedicate each of our lives to increasing opportunity in the way that each one of us can do it, which is not just to increase opportunity in our lives, but each one of us can touch others so that they can earn their success and lift themselves up. This is the best way for us to accumulate and share true wealth. And fourth, I'd like to ask each of us to spread the word about what we've done in the last 2 days, specifically that we have been here with His Holiness discussing these things. What can we write? What can we say? What can we tell the public? Because this can't be the end of the conversation. This has to be the beginning of the conversation. His Holiness has modeled the goals that I've just talked about, and we can too. And I think with humility, we should ask His Holiness for His blessing so that we can live these goals every day and be enriched and enrich others on the basis of what we've heard here. So as the beginning of the conversation, the beginning of our movement, I'd like to, on behalf of all of us, thank you, Your Holiness. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been an honor to be with you. Thank you to all of you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, our conference is finished. God bless you, and travel safely.
Thank you very much.